Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving right into the life of one of the most influential, yet honestly often underappreciated figures in all of Islamic history. We're going to be unpacking the truly extraordinary journey of Lady Salama.
You know, we really need to move beyond these two-dimensional mentions of her as just a wife. We need to ask a much more profound question here. What does it actually take to endure absolute heartbreak, rise to become a primary advisor to a prophet, and literally help lay the legal foundations for an entire civilization?
To answer that, we're pulling from incredibly rich historical texts like Exemplary Women. We really want to get to the core of her true, multifaceted identity. We're not just talking about a mother of the believers here. We're talking about a fierce intellectual and a massive political force. So, tracing her amazing 84-year journey, we'll look at the trials of her early conversion, her marriage to the Prophet, her brilliant wisdom at Hudaybiyyah, her legacy as a top-tier scholar, and finally, her steadfast role as a defender of the Ahl al-Baits. Starting right off with Section 1, the trials of early conversion. Before she was Salama, she was Hind bint Abi Umayya, part of the absolute elite Banu Makhzum clan of the Quraysh. But she left that highly comfortable, privileged life behind to embrace a brand new, heavily persecuted faith alongside her first husband, Umm Salama. And man, that early commitment took a massive physical and emotional toll on her. She's often remembered as the Lady of the Two Migrations. She first had to escape to Abyssinia and then later attempted the Hijrah to Medina. But that second migration, it ended in disaster. Her own tribe violently pulled her away from her husband, while her husband's tribe forcibly grabbed her infant son, Salama. They just ripped her family apart. I mean, just listen to the profound agony in her own accounts of this. She described how she went out at noon every single day, sitting at the exact spot where they were separated, just weeping until nightfall. Imagine that daily torment. A mother torn from her infant and her husband. Our sources tell us she did this for an entire year, until her tribesmen finally took pity on her and let her reunite with her family in Medina.
Which brings us to Section 2, her marriage to the Prophet. Because after surviving that grueling separation, and then the devastating loss of Umm Salama from wounds he got at the Battle of Uhud, her life takes this monumental turn. Now, left as a widow with young kids, she actually turned down marriage proposals from several prominent companions. But when Prophet Muhammad proposed, the exchange they had was just incredibly empathetic. She didn't hold back. She boldly laid out her boundaries and insecurities, saying she was older, she had a really jealous nature, and she had these orphan children to care for. And he met every single one of those concerns with profound reassurance, promising her that her family was now his family. It really set a beautiful foundation of mutual respect.
All right, moving into Section 3, let's fast forward to the 6th year after migration. This is where we hit one of the absolute most critical political moments in early Islamic history, the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah. Basically, the Muslims had just agreed to a really bitter truce with the Meccans that stopped them from performing their pilgrimage. And the Prophet's companions, about 1,400 of them, were just so dejected. They were so heartbroken by these treaty terms that they essentially refused a direct order to sacrifice their animals and shave their heads. The Prophet actually retreated to his tent in dismay. But right there, in that incredibly tense, dangerous moment, Salama steps in and offers him this brilliant tension-breaking advice. She told him to just go out, not speak a word to anyone, slaughter his camel, and cut his hair. That insight wasn't just helpful, it was a literal masterclass in human psychology. She realized the companions weren't an outright rebellion, they were just paralyzed by emotion. By telling the Prophet to lead through silent, visual action, she completely broke that tension. The second the Prophet slaughtered his camel, the companions just snapped out of it and rushed to do the exact same thing. She basically saved the nascent Muslim state from a disastrous crisis of disobedience right there. Let's look at Section 4, a scholar among scholars. Because transitioning from a brilliant political advisor, we start to see her acting as a foundational legal mind. She definitely wasn't a passive observer, she was a highly active intellectual architect of the Islamic tradition. 378. That's the astounding number of hadiths she narrated. It firmly established her as an undeniable anchor of Islamic jurisprudence. Scholars across the board, male and female, constantly sought her counsel on complex legal rulings and interpretations of the Quran. Her judgment was just considered that competent and precise. She also had the fierce courage to ask direct political questions about female representation. She actually went to the Prophet and asked why the Quran seemingly addressed men more frequently than women. And you know what?
That direct inquiry resulted in the divine revelation of verse 33-35, which explicitly established the spiritual equality of men and women.
On top of that, as an elite scholar and deeply trusted confidant, she was the primary witness to some massive theological events. Take the famous verse of purification, or Ayat al-Tathhir, which declared the purity of the Prophet, Ali, Fatima, Hassan, and Hussein. That was revealed literally right in her own living room. And she documented these foundational moments with absolute meticulous care. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Defender of the Al-Baits. In the decades following the Prophet's passing, her role shifted again. She became this fierce, unyielding protector of his descendants, navigating the incredibly complex and often dangerous political fractures of the early caliphates. Our historical sources show her stepping up as a powerful, active defender of Imam Ali's leadership. During the intense civil conflict of the Battle of Jamal, she vehemently opposed the factions fighting against Ali. She actually went so far as to send her own son, Omar, to fight in Ali's army, which really solidified her unwavering public support for the Prophet's designated family. Then there's this deeply emotional historical account from her later years, connecting her to the tragedy of Karbala. Tradition tells us that the Prophet entrusted her with a glass bottle containing some soil, prophesying it would turn to blood when his grandson Hussein was martyred. And when it miraculously did, she became the very first person in Medina to weep and publicly announce the devastating loss. Right up until her final days, she was a true pillar of strength. She outlived all the other wives of the Prophet, she kept issuing legal rulings, she advised leaders, and she was entrusted with the deposits of imamate by Imam Hussein, basically acting as the final custodian of the community's spiritual legacy. She eventually passed away at the age of 84, leaving behind a world that was fundamentally changed by her presence. So I want to leave you with this thought to ponder. When we look back at the monumental architecture of early Islamic history, how often do we overlook the women who actually drew up the blueprints? Her life is absolute proof that the foundations of history are built on the brilliant resilience, the deep intellect, and the unwavering courage of women we are honestly only just beginning to truly understand. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today.